Welcome to another episode of AI 10X brought to you by 10 Leaves.
It's great to be here.
So today we are doing a deep dive into something that, well, it kind of flips the whole script on how we usually talk about AI.
It really does.
Yeah.
The normal narrative is always globalization, right?
Exactly. One giant model accessible everywhere, this sort of digital utopia. But the reports we have in front of us today are pointing in a completely different direction. We're talking about the rise of sovereign AI.
And something that researchers are calling digital nationalism.
Digital nationalism. I mean, it's a massive pivot.
Oh, a huge pivot. For the last, decade, the mantra has been scale, build the biggest model, train it on the entire internet, serve it to everyone. But now we're seeing entire nations just hit the brakes.
Right. They're looking at these huge, mostly U.S.-centric models and having second thoughts.
They're realizing that relying on them might be a massive strategic mistake.
Yeah.
This is where high-tech meets hard geopolitical reality.
And reading through this, the thing that struck me was the sheer intensity of this shift. This isn't just a few countries, tweaking a few settings.
No.
We're talking about nations spending billions of dollars to build their own large language models from scratch. And that's what I want to get into first, the why. Because we know this is not easy. It's thousands of H100s, huge energy costs.
Niche talent, yeah.
So why take the hard road?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question. And if you dig into the analysis, it's clear the goal isn't efficiency.
Right. If you wanted efficiency, just, ping an API in California.
Exactly. The goal is one word: control. The source material argues that nations are waking up to the fact that AI isn't just a software tool anymore. It's becoming the cognitive infrastructure of the state. Cognitive infrastructure, wow. That's a heavy term. It almost implies that if you don't own it, you're rending your country's ability to think. In a way, yes. I mean, think about it. If your entire education system, your medical diagnostics, your government services, if they all run on a model that's hosted and aligned by a foreign power, you've effectively outsourced your national cognition.
Okay. So where do they want control? The sources break it down into three big alignment problems: language, values, and laws. Let's start with language. I think for English speakers, this is something that's really easy to miss. The big models, GPT-4, Claude, Llama, they're just overwhelmingly trained on English data.
It's a huge blind spot. And it's not just about, say, translation quality. The issue is deeper. It's about tokenization and just the fundamental nuance of reasoning.
So even if it can speak French, it's what? Thinking in English.
That's a great way to put it. It's applying Anglo-American logic patterns to local problems. The research mentioned low-resource languages. And if your nation's language is one of those, the AI just doesn't perform as well.
It hallucinates more, or it sort of flattens the culture. I saw a note that called it a loss of cultural resolution.
It's basically cultural erosion. Imagine you're from a culture with a very distinct, high-context communication style, and all day your citizens are talking to a bot that uses this very direct, low-context American corporate speak.
Over time, that's going to change how people communicate.
It has to. So sovereign AI is an attempt to build a model where their own language is a first-class citizen, not just a translation layer on top of an English-centric core, which fills right into the second bucket, values. This is the alignment problem we always talk about.
Yeah.
Scaled up to a national level.
Right. The source material makes a great point. No model is neutral. They all have a view from somewhere.
There's no such thing as a view from nowhere.
Exactly. Every data set has a bias. Every messy pile of internet data you train these things on, it has a flavor. And if you import a model from Silicon Valley, you are importing Silicon Valley values.
Views on MOOC, work, social issues, privacy.
History. That was the example that really stood out. You ask an AI about a controversial historical event, and depending on whose data it was trained on, you get two completely different, totally confident answers.
For a government, that's a non-starter. You can't have a foreign AI teaching your citizens a version of your own history that conflicts with the national narrative. It's a sovereignty risk.
So they want an AI that understands local social norms, things like politeness or how you address an elder.
All of it. They want the technology to reinforce their social fabric, not tear it apart. And that brings us to the third pillar, laws. This one seems, the most practical, maybe. The EU AI Act, GDPR, it's the compliance nightmare.
Yeah.
If a German bank uses a U.S. model, Does that model's output comply with GDPR?
Right.
If it hallucinates something defamatory about a citizen whose laws even apply?
It's a legal minefield.
Totally. So by building the model domestically, a nation can just bake its legal framework directly into the AI's guardrails, its risk management from the ground up.
You're basically creating a legal container for the AI that perfectly matches the country's borders.
Okay, but I want to pivot a bit. We've talked about the soft stuff culture, values, law. But the report gets really deep into the hard infrastructure.
The plumbing.
The plumbing, exactly. The whole independence from big tech section. This is where I think our audience will see the real friction. Because we're not just talking about code anymore.
No, we're talking about deep systemic dependencies. The sources say nations are absolutely terrified of being shut off.
And they should be, right.
Mm.
The supply chain for AI is so concentrated. The chips, the cloud providers.
It's incredibly concentrated. The most advanced chips basically come from one company. The cloud is dominated by 3 or 4 American hyperscalers. If you're a sovereign nation and your entire AI capability runs on a foreign cloud, you have a single point of failure that is completely out of your control.
It's a kill switch.
It is. If diplomatic relations sour or sanctions get applied, or even if the company just changes its pricing, you're helpless. This is about data sovereignty in its truest sense. It's not just about privacy, then. It's about having the physical ability to process your own data on your own soil.
That's the core of it.
Yeah.
And it connects to another idea that came up, rent-seeking. If a country doesn't build its own compute, its own data centers, it's just paying a permanent tax on intelligence to a foreign company. That's a huge economic point. AI is going to generate a massive chunk of future GDP. If all that value capture happens on a server farm in Virginia instead of locally, that's a massive economic leak for your country.
So governments are now subsidizing national clouds, local GPUs, local data centers. It's like a digital version of mercantilism.
Which brings us to what might be the biggest consequence of all of this, the thing the report really focuses on at the end, the shift from a unipolar AI world to a multipolar one.
This is the big macro trend. We're really moving away from that one world, one web idea. The source predicts a future of, and I'm quoting, multiple ecosystems.
We can already see the cracks forming. In a multipolar AI world, you won't have one dominant model everyone uses. You'll have a constellation of sovereign models, a French ecosystem, an Indian ecosystem, a Chinese one.
A Middle Eastern one.
Each with its own hardware, its own foundation models, its own application layer.
It sounds like the splinter net, but deeper.
It's not just about firewalls blocking websites. It's that the actual engines of intelligence are different.
And potentially incompatible. That's the risk. If the French AI has different data standards and safety protocols than the US AI, how do they talk to each other? How do you build a global application if the intelligence layer underneath is fragmented?
That would be a complete nightmare for developers. You'd have to fine-tune your app for every single jurisdiction, not just for language, but for reality alignment.
It creates incredible friction. But from the perspective of these nations, that friction is just the price of independence. They'll sacrifice that global interoperability to make sure they aren't tied to a foreign power's tech roadmap.
They want to own the stack. They want to own the stack. That's the entire thesis.
It's not enough to just have internet access anymore. You need the compute, the data, and the model itself.
And the talent. We didn't even touch on that much, but building a sovereign ecosystem is also a jobs program. It's a way to fight brain drain.
A brain drain defense mechanism.
Precisely. You keep your best engineers and researchers at home, building for your own ecosystem.
Okay, so let's synthesize this. We started by asking why nations are spending billions to reinvent the wheel. And the answer is, they don't see it as a wheel. They see it as the engine of the modern state.
And they need control. Control over language to preserve culture, control over values for social alignment, and control over their infrastructure for security and economic reasons.
And the result of all this is a fractured, multipolar world. We're moving away from universal AI and towards nationalized AI.
It's a fundamental redefinition of digital independence. A decade ago, that meant having a fiber optic cable connecting you to the world.
And now it means having a GPU cluster that can run independently from the world.
It's a shift from just connectivity to resilience. And frankly, it changes the power dynamics for the next 50 years. The nations that build these sovereign stacks are the ones who get to write their own future.
And the ones who don't become client states in the digital economy.
That's the risk. You'll have the AI haves and the AI have-nots, but it'll be defined by sovereignty, not just access.
Wow. So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought from this research, something that's really sticking with me. We get the geopolitical logic. It all makes a certain kind of sense. But what about the human cost of this fragmentation?
You mean if we're building a world where every nation has its own AI, trained on its own data, aligned to its own values, we're essentially automating confirmation bias at a national level.
That's the worry, isn't it? If my AI and your AI are trained on fundamentally different versions of reality, do we eventually lose the ability to find any common ground at all?
We could be building digital towers of Babel. Not because we can't translate the words anymore, but because the underlying concepts, the truth that the AI gives you, are just fundamentally incompatible between nations.
And communication needs a shared reality to function. It feels like sovereign AI might be prioritizing national identity at the expense of that shared reality. It's a trade-off, and I guess it's one we're all going to have to navigate.
It certainly seems that way.
This was AI 10X, brought to you by 10 Leaves.